Now that we've calculated the sums of squares total, which is shown here, we're going to calculate the sums of squares between people and the sums of squares due to admissions. We'll begin with the sums of squares between people. The sums of squares between people will be the difference between the mean for each person and the grand mean. So in this cell, I will begin with the mean for person number 1 minus the grand mean, and I'll fix the grand mean with F4 so it will always be referencing that cell, a right paren, and hat 2. And I will drag this column down so that I have the same value for each person. The square of the difference between the average for the person and the overall average. Now, to get the sum of squares between people, which will go into this cell, I'm going to add the values in column K. However, as with one-way analysis of variance, we needed to multiply the sum of averaged values times the number of things over which they were averaged in order to get the actual sums of squares value. So in this case, each average for each person was averaged over 3 admissions. So to begin, we'll say equal 3 because each of the averages is over 3 people, times, and then the sum of the values in row K. When I hit enter, I get this as the sums of squares between people. I could just as easily have multiplied each of these values times 3 and then summed them all here. It would have given me exactly the same answer. What I did instead was I multiplied the sum of the values times 3. Now we'll get the sums of squares due to admissions, which will go in this cell here. In order to get the sums of squares due to admissions, we proceed in the same way. This is the average for the first admission, for the second admission, and for the third admission. So we begin by saying equal the average for the first admission minus the total average, and that will be fixed with an F4, hat 2 to square it, and I'll drag these values to the right. And these are the values I'm going to sum in order to get the sums of squares due to admissions. Again, each admission is averaged across 12 people. So in order to get the total value, it will be equal 12 times the sum of these 3 cells. And when I hit enter, I get this value, which is the sums of squares due to admission.